Good morning. We'll now call the July 19th meeting of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners to order. For the record, there is an automatic defibrillator in the back for anybody for health reasons. And over here on the north wall is a copy of the Open Meetings Act. It's somewhere in the building. With that, I'll ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With that, we will call the Douglas County Board of Equalization meeting to order. Mr. Clerk, roll call, please.
Commissioner Borgeson is absent. Commissioner Boyle? Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh? Here. Commissioner Friend? Here. Commissioner Garcia? Here. Commissioner Morgan?
Present.
Mr. Chair.
Here. Item A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, July 12, 2022. And item B is a call for a meeting set Tuesday, July 26, 2022 is the date for next hearing on certified assessment and corrections. What's the will of the board? There's a motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item C is citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on Board of Equalization related matters that may not be on the agenda. Are there any citizens' comments at this time?
Good morning, Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I want to take opportunity this morning, starting off early in case I do get removed, but I want to talk about the Constitution that we all swear allegiance to. And I want to make a suggestion that in this year of an upcoming election that we all take another look at our Constitution and think about how our government at all levels, including state and local, aren't necessarily following what the Founding Fathers intended. So you need to understand that the Declaration of Independence does not separate from the Constitution. They're one and the same. In the Declaration, it tells us that when your government does not perform the way it ought to be, it is your right and your duty to overthrow that government by changing it, altering it, and repositioning a new government to suit the aims of the ruling people. We, the people, are the rulers here. The Constitution is for all of us, not just certain groups. So now today we have a lot of groups that are national groups, maybe. They're nonprofits groups. They're outsiders, maybe. They're not necessarily our friends, but with their money, they're influencing our government bodies. And we have a lot of laws that aren't necessarily equal. And that needs to get changed. So what I'm suggesting is this year, since the progressives out there want to convince you that a convention of states is another constitutional convention, that we debate that on the floor of various local government bodies and state, because there is no way that it can be another constitutional convention unless Congress changes it themselves. People need to understand that. The likelihood of a convention of states amendment, which is the only way the Founding Fathers intended to alter, change, or replace your government, is the only method they recommended. They did not talk about another revolution. The French Revolution didn't go very well, did it? And various revolutions across the world for democracy's sake didn't work very well either. Most democracies in history have failed. But there are people around here, including some on these bodies here in Omaha, that still want to refer to us as a democracy. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that. We are a unique, compound constitutional republic. So since we can't convince people around here, our government, down at the state, for example, that the people have a right to call a convention, not to call it, but to submit a petition for a convention of states, that we have that discussion in the local bodies, since they're supposed to support and defend the Constitution. Debate Article 5 and why it came about. So my suggestion is, since we can't have that debate on any of the levels of government in the state of Nebraska, that we have another category of write-in candidate on the midterms and the general election. And the name of those candidates are We the People, so that we, the people, can take our Constitution back from governments like yourself that are out of whack with spending and recognizing special groups, honoring special groups, parading for special groups, and spending our tax dollars for special groups. Nowhere in the Constitution does it give you the power to do that. Thank you.
Anyone else with citizens' comments? Seeing none, we'll go to resolutions. Item D, E, F, and G are there. Hearing nothing, is there a motion to approve those items and adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Morgan, is there a second?
I do have some evidence.
You do? Well, come now. Is there a second on that? Second by Commissioner Moore.
I apologize, I nearly missed my cue.
No problem.
I have some evidence to
Sir, can you state your name for the record, please?
Nick O'Brien.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm appearing on behalf of 24th and Dodge GP LLC, which is under consideration for a new value for 2022.
Okay.
This property was previously tax exempt and is now being assigned a value. I have a packet of information I'd like to submit to the board for consideration related to that value. Currently, the value has been proposed at $3,111,000. And the information that I'll submit shows that the property was purchased this year for $2,325,000. And I would submit that that would be the proper valuation of the property. And so included in the information I'll submit today, I have information related to that purchase and information related to how the property was listed and marketed at a price much less than the proposed tax value. And would suggest that the value be set at the purchase price that was purchased earlier this year from a third-party buyer.
Okay, you done, sir?
Yes.
Thanks. Mr. Goodwillie, you got any guidance on that?
If you give me just a second, Commissioner, Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor, Register of Deeds Office.
So it is 2401 Dodge Street.
2401 Dodge.
Correct.
Okay.
That the old Enron building?
And 124 South 24th Street as well. There are 3 parcels that are under consideration here.
Well, I have to tell you, I haven't been armed with a lot of the backstory here of where we got to that number, which would have been quite helpful. If I were to make an observation in general, when nonprofits or political subdivisions sell properties, at least in the mass appraisal literature, they are typically non-arm's length transactions. But I don't have anything in more detail that would enable me to address what's been presented here today. It would have been helpful to have that ahead of time, but obviously that wasn't an option.
Understood.
Now, the other option you have, Commissioners, is you could do one of a couple of things, okay? You could reduce the value now without without providing any kind of opportunity to analyze what's been presented today. You could adopt the value now, and the taxpayer has a right to protest, or you could perhaps lay these three things over, I think there were what, 3 parcels?
Correct, yes.
You could lay those over, give us a week to look at them, and then we could provide a little additional information as to where that number came from.
I think I'd amend my motion to lay that over.
Those
So we
3
check
parcels.
Let me ask this, Commissioner Moore. Is there consent among the board that we would remove the motion in a second from the table? Okay, seeing yes. So with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the
Sweet.
D, E,
I mean, we may end up, we may.
F, and G with the removal of 22072, 22073, and 22074 to lay that over a week. Would that give you enough time, Mr.
Sure.
Goodwin? Okay.
Do we still want to include adjournment, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you clear on that motion?
Yes, I am.
So, sir, your item's gonna be laid over a week so they can get more analysis and they'll come to the board next week.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent.
Let me know when you're ready, Mr. Clerk.
I am ready.
That has been, so that's the motion. Is there a motion and a second for it? Commissioner Boyle, seconded. Motion by Commissioner Morgan. Seeing nothing, please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
We will now call to order the Douglas County Board of Corrections meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Borgeson is absent. Commissioner Boyle? Commissioner Kavanaugh? Commissioner Friend?
Here.
Commissioner Garcia? Commissioner Morgan? Mr. Chair.
Here, item 1 is approval of the minutes of the Board of Corrections meeting held Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Friend. Roll call. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item 2 is citizens' comments for the Board of Corrections. Is there anyone that has comments on Board of Corrections related items that are not listed on the agenda? Are there any citizens' comments for the Board of Corrections at this time? Seeing none, we'll go to item 3 and the report from Director Myers.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michael Myers, Director of Corrections for Douglas County. You have before you our report for the month of June. Moving to enclosure number 1, administrative services. We finished the year $25,532 under budget. We were also able to encumber a significant amount of unspent funds to offset the costs of projects that will continue into the new fiscal year. There was $440,482 spent on overtime during June. That was a significant increase of approximately $100,000 over the previous month. This is likely due to a combination of summer leave usage, and currently we have attrition outpacing hiring. Enclosure number 2, community corrections and reentry services. The Sanction Center and Transitional Discharge Center placed a total of 12 individuals in community corrections and saved 66 bed days. The 27 sobriety program placed 72 individuals on the program. There were 3,578 breath tests were conducted. 16 were positive for alcohol use, and there were 14 no-shows. And the compliance rate for breath testing was 99.9%. 52 individuals were monitored for a total of 1,164 days of scram monitoring. There was 1 no-show, 0 tampering violations, and 0 alcohol violations, and the scram compliance rate was also 99.9%. There were 1,012 drug tests administered. There were 133 violations and 48 no-shows. There were 18 drug testing patches submitted for testing, with 9 violations. Work release admitted 33 individuals. That was an increase. House arrest admitted 52 individuals. The Reentry Assistance Program, or RAP, admitted 17 individuals, and Reentry Services and Therapeutic Communities admitted 119 individuals. There were 293 individuals placed on pre-trial release, 1,113 overall were managed on pre-trial release with an 84% compliance rate. 71 individuals visited the law library. A mock or soft launch of our enhanced pretrial supervision program actually launched yesterday. For a brief period of time, our staff will be practicing administering the public safety assessment in a non-live setting to assure they've developed the efficiency needed to not slow the processes associated with bond setting when we go live in the courtroom, which should be within the next couple of weeks. Enclosure number 3, compliance. We are always collecting documentation for all compliance processes. We are, we have, as of now, had our prison rape elimination audit. That occurred last week, and I was out of the office for much of that. I got a briefing before I left, and by and large, that audit was going quite well. Enclosure number 4, 13 individuals below the rank of sergeant and 1 sergeant left employment in June. Reasons for these departures varied from moving out of state, accepting employment with other agencies, and 2 were due to personnel matters. And on a related note, I'd like to congratulate that sergeant, Sergeant Michael Henricks, on his retirement after 20 years of service to Douglas County. 10 new officers began our training academy on July 11th. We continue to research and implement strategies to improve recruitment and retention, as well as building resiliency among our workforce. Turning to enclosure number 5, our population. There were 1,287 admissions in June. That was a decrease from May. There was 1,306 releases. Our high count was 1,047 and our low count was 987. Our average daily population was 1,017. That was a decrease of 17 from the month of May. I will note that so far in July we are tracking higher than what we were running, around 1,100. There were 109 custodial sanctioned bed days. The U.S. Marshal population increased slightly. The felony pretrial population decreased slightly. The misdemeanor pretrial population increased slightly, and the probation violations decreased slightly. 19% of our population were between the ages of 18 and 24. 64% of our population were minorities, and 16% of our population was female. To enclosure number 6, medical, we conducted 1,072 intake screenings and 341 health and physical assessments. Inmates were sent out 19 times over the course of the month for emergent medical care. 8 of those were by 911. There were 10 hospitalizations, which resulted in 36 days combined of there were 10 hospital admissions, which resulted in 36 days of combined hospitalization. And there were 42 off-site medical appointments. Enclosure number 7, mental health. There were 144 initial psychiatric assessments, 31 initial mental health assessments. There were 100 mental health infirmary placements. There were 157 individuals placed on drug and alcohol withdrawal protocols. There were 6 referrals to the Board of Mental Health and 10 transfers, which is a kind of an anomaly for us to get this many, but 10 individuals were transferred to long-term psychiatric facility, which is typically always the Lincoln Regional Center. Other noteworthy items, we continue to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. We had 10 known cases of COVID-19 among the incarcerated population resulting in the quarantine of multiple housing units. And in full disclosure and transparency, I suspect the actual number was much higher. When we quarantine a housing unit, we test people as they become symptomatic. It's simply a resource issue to go around and test hundreds of people every time we have a case. But we watch to make sure that people aren't getting too sick. 5 staff members tested positive throughout the month. Our staff vaccination rate remains at approximately 75%. This should say during June, we administered 72 first doses of Moderna, 21 second doses of Moderna, and 34 booster doses of Moderna. And separately at community corrections, the Douglas County Health Department administered 34 second doses of Moderna. As of June 1, we have fully vaccinated 1,737 individuals and provided boosters to 201 individuals. Due to the CDC recently recalibrating risk matrices, we are currently reassessing our COVID risk and response protocols. We are working with our medical director, Dr. Anthony Montague, and health director, Dr. Lindsay Hughes, to refine our responses. Deployment of our body-worn cameras continues, and a full rollout to all areas of the jail will continue over the course of the remaining summer months. Our inmate tablet project is also heading towards fruition with a projected go-live date of prior to October 1st. And finally, our educational and vocational supervisor, Heather Robinson, recently informed me that she inadvertently started a writing club with a few of her students. And several of them had letters published in a publication known as the Nebraska Criminal Justice Review. And I would like to read one of them to you, written by Levi. This isn't another story saying I had a rough childhood. This is a story of me telling you how I signed my death certificate at a young age. I never really wanted to be anything because nobody ever pushed me to dream, only to live in the moment. But that is no way to live, because when the moment is over, I seem to die until the next moment comes around. I found the Lord in 2016 and then lost him again because I went back to what I knew. In 2021, around early November, something happened that made me drop my flag. I was done being a bad child, brother, uncle, boyfriend, and many other things. I ripped up my death certificate and picked up the I want to live a successful life certificate. I was done hurting. I didn't want to be afraid anymore. I didn't want to hate or dislike a certain color. I just simply wanted to live. It wasn't until I met Terry with the Criminal Community Justice Center, those are one of our program providers at the jail, that I found my calling. I've always wanted to get better. I just didn't know where to start until now. And with that, I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Director Myers. I see in the queue first Commissioner Boyle, then Commissioner Friend. Commissioner Boyle.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. That letter is, of course, it says a lot, not only for the rehabilitation ability of folks that are in the correction system, but also the services that are provided to help people make that leap. And so my comment, I've got a couple comments. One is, first of all, I think looking at the numbers again, we always talk about mental health, and you can see right there, here's somebody who had a serious, not necessarily diagnosed maybe with something mental health, but how his mental health really changed the trajectory of his life, and he finally was able to come to that point where he was able to turn his life around, is what it sounds like. Looking at the statistics, once again, it looks like 44% of the population of the prison has a mental health diagnosis. So more than anything, I just want to bring to light the fact that we as a board are trying to figure out ways to commit to commit to that corrections population to really get mental health in place so that they get the services they need, and rather than have our corrections officers providing a lot of those services, getting folks that really are trained and educated to do that, just so that they can maximize their potential and help with outcomes, and not mix like someone with a mental illness is not mixed in with the criminal population. When you look at the mental health diagnoses that we see in the report, they range from things that probably most people on the streets have, like adjustment disorder and anxiety, to bipolar, and then we get into psychosis and schizophrenia and things like that. So I think it's really our job to make sure that we get folks the services they need, so they're not so that they can get out of those non-criminal circumstances as best as possible. So that was just one thing, and that inadvertent writing class turns out to be, I think, very valuable, because I think just writing is good to open up folks' minds, and then we know where they're coming from too, and it helps address their issues. The second thing is more structural and mechanical. It has to do with the enhanced pretrial supervision program. I think I might just need a brief education on what pretrial release is all about, and what does that mean folks are going out into the community, and how is public safety maintained, and who are those folks that are released? So if you could just give me a little education on some of that.
Absolutely. So I'll start by going back in time a little bit. If I went back 10 years, what pretrial release was the judge would set a bond or not set a bond on a low-level offense, and they'd say, and add pretrial release as a condition of their bond, or a condition of their release if they didn't set a bond. And basically what that consisted of 10 years ago was simply that they had to call in to a number at corrections once every 24 hours on a recorded line, just to verify that they were, still being present, and that hadn't vanished to the wind. It wasn't a very strong level of supervision, obviously. About, I think, 8 years ago now, we started a program called the 24/7 Sobriety Program. And that was never conceptualized as specifically being a pretrial release program, but that really is what it turned out to be. Well over 95% of the people who are placed on that program are placed on it as a condition of their bond. And so we added alcohol testing for the first 2 years. That was the only, first 2 to 3 years, that was what 24/7 was just alcohol monitoring, and it was mainly just DUI offenders. Or it could be another crime, but there had to be a nexus with alcohol consumption to be on that program. Like I said, after a few years, we added a drug testing component as well to the 24/7 program, and so we added, the list of eligible people increased quite a bit. Now that has like over 450 people on it on any given day doing those testing. What we're doing going forward is we're administering a new assessment that will give the judges much more information than what our current assessment does, and we will be sort of codifying different levels of supervision, so that when the judge says you get assigned a pretrial release, we will then determine what level they are at, and then we have a menu of supervision and supportive services that they will be placed on.
I see. And then does that mean supportive services? I understand, but the monitoring, is it? Like
GPS monitoring, check-ins with the staff, various different tools that we'll have, including 24/7 and the other things we've always had, to maintain communication and know the whereabouts and the activities of people while they're on pretrial.
Thanks.
Commissioner Fran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, for about the last year and a half or so, maybe even 2 years, I've been trying to pay really close attention to all of the things you say, but I think I've paid pretty close attention to the personnel concerns and the things that you've been dealing with. with that in mind, I was going to ask you, and you and I have talked about this in passing, and all the commissioners have heard in executive session certain things which raise certain types of red flags, especially recently. I guess what I would ask is, in a public forum, in any way, shape, or form that you can answer it, how many, we lost 13, we're 13 officers below the rank of sergeant and 1 sergeant left employment in June alone. Those numbers vary from month to month, but how many officers down are we? Let's say you didn't lose the 13 officers, and that would be rare. How many officers down are you from authorized staffing levels if you didn't lose those 13? So I guess what I'm getting at is, are you behind the 8 ball right now if you weren't losing those 13 and sending 10 off to training, right?
Things are getting pretty challenging for our staff. We, with an increasing frequency, find ourselves having to shut down certain activities or certain functions because of staffing levels. And our staff, they're tired. And we are, to answer your question from a numbers standpoint, we are between 60 and 65 officers below our authorized strength right now. And that is taking a toll and is altering our operations on a regular basis.
Okay, and I was never really good at math, but my next question, you just answered it. So we can do the math and we can figure out exactly with training, with academies and things happening, we can do the math and try to figure out how long it would take you to get to authorized staffing levels, providing that those numbers on the front end don't increase. Right. What I would, look, the whole line of questioning, and it wasn't much, but the whole line isn't necessarily to develop a case for increased pay, even though those discussions are ongoing. It's done to establish an understanding with the public, I think, it's my intent, to establish an understanding with the public that you are not at authorized staffing levels. And if you're not at authorized staffing levels, Mike, what type of public safety issue does that actually create? And again, I'm not negotiating contracts here. I'm not doing anything of that nature. I'm trying to figure out what type of public safety issue that causes. You have guards and you have officers that are strained. You have they're working overtime. They're getting pushed to the limit. What does that do? The public doesn't. Maybe the public does know, but put that in context for us, sure, if you could.
Well, it creates a lot of potential issues in terms of the officers' fatigue. They're not as alert to their environment, and that provides the opportunity for bad things of all sorts to occur. In addition, when you get to the impact that has on their morale,
1 minute.
There may be some level of complacency that also sets in, which could also impact their performance and their vigilance that they're able to put forth on a day-to-day, really hour-by-hour basis. When we are forced to start shutting down areas of the jail early, which what I mean by that is locking inmates in their cells so that we can send overworked and tired staff home, we run the risk of increased tension among the inmate population. We try to do a good job of communicating proactively with them, tell them, hey, make your phone calls now because we're shutting the housing unit down an hour and a half early today. And that seems to help quite a bit to mitigate that tension. But that certainly, if you're forced to do that on a regular basis and for a protracted amount of time, as we've seen in other institutions in our state, it does have or can have consequences.
It's time. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thanks for this, Mike, and again, condolences on your recent loss. I hope you can hear me. I'm just recovered from COVID, so I'm wearing a mask on the advice of my physician and my colleague, Dr. Boyle, just to be extra careful. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. This will come as no surprise. I ask you almost the exact same questions every time, just to get us a timeline of some of the metrics of the corrections situation. Your average daily population number of 1,017 is on page 2 is kind of interesting because I look at that and looking at it over time, if I'm correct in my analysis here, kind of the year to year on, I think it's page 25 maybe, shows that there's been kind of a steady decline in population over the last 12 months of about 10%. Any reason for that? Is that a national phenomenon? Is there something?
I can't say that that's a national phenomenon. There was a large decrease nationally when the pandemic first hit, and we had some of that as well, but that sort of normalized over the course of 2021. I do know like the 24/7 program is getting higher utilization as a pretrial option instead of detention. That could be part of it. I wish I had an answer of what, I'm sure it's more than one factor that's contributing to that. We are grateful to have it because, you know, it does give us a little bit of breathing room on how we house people and as well as staffing wise. But I do want to point out that a lot of times this year we've been able to have 4 housing units closed. However, because of the increase, you know, we used to run about 35-36% of our inmates having a diagnosed mental illness. Recently, that's been, you know, running in the low to mid 40%. And so we have housing units that we now staff with 2 officers that we used to just staff with 1, just to maintain safety and to meet the needs of the individuals who are present in those housing units. So any gain that we might have by having housing units closed is basically offset by staffing certain housing units with an additional officer.
And that kind of goes to questions that Commissioner Friend was asking. Regarding this staffing authorized level and on-hand levels, we're authorized for department-wide 492 individuals, and we're staffed on hand today 418, or about 85%. And the CO1's actual bulk of the officers, the frontline officers, and this is on page 6, are actually at 80%. And in my experience here, we've never been really much higher than that in terms of on-hand staffing. It seems that it hovers in the 80s someplace, and certainly the COs are particularly troubling because they're the frontline people. But do you see that needle moving at all going forward?
Well, there are some things that we are working on that I hope will have an impact. Some of which the board is aware of that we've discussed in executive session.
1 minute.
We have in the past been this low or even lower in 2019. And we worked very hard, and by early 2020, we were actually right at, or 100% staffing for a brief period of time. And it's been a slow, it's kind of a slow bleed of staff ever since, which is kind of, not inconsistent what you've seen across corrections facilities around the country, but also just in every type of business struggling to find a labor force these days. We used to have, 20 to 25 people that we would pick out of 200 for our academy classes. And now we're hiring, 10 to 12, if we're lucky, out of a pool of 40.
Sure.
And so that has certainly been a challenge for us.
And I've got a couple more here. I might have to come back. But on the racial demographics on page 41, again.
That's time. Commissioner Kavanaugh, you have to use it on the other one.
Okay.
Commissioner Friend, then Commissioner Boyle, then Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mike, real quick, I may have forgotten or I didn't write it down. How many officers can be sent to a training class? I mean, you're sending 10 on July 11th, or
Yes.
Oh, you just sent 10.
Right, correct.
What's the capacity? How many can you train in a
We could
class?
probably fit about 25 before things get kind of unmanageable for our instructors, and when we get kind of challenged with the space requirements of certain trainings.
Okay, and can you tell me, let's say things just started going really well, when's the last time you had 25 at a training class? I mean, has it been a while?
I cannot recall.
I don't remember. I usually look at those numbers. Look, I guess I'm not trying to filibuster or do anything of that nature. I would say that this only to point out that of the 12, we have 1,287 detainees, or at least admissions, and we have some releases, and the high count was at 1,047. The majority of those individuals are either residents of Douglas County or they're residents of the region.
Correct.
And public safety, it sounds simplistic and it sounds elementary, but public safety extends to each one of those people, every one of them. And if you're shorthanded and somebody decides to do something in a detention area that is not being monitored or is not being appropriately dealt with on an hourly basis, these people are in jeopardy. And that affects public safety. They're guests or they're wards of the county, and not guess is a weird term. It's our responsibility to watch them.
Correct.
And that concerns me greatly, and I think it does the other commissioners. I think it goes without saying. Mike, the discussion will continue. All I can say is I think we get it. Question is, where do a lot of the steps take us at this point? So thanks for the clarification on some of that stuff. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boyle.
So just looking through things too, and piggybacking on what my commissioner colleagues have stated, is there a minimum number of officers at which we can still keep the facility open, as far as like shutting down all programs? It sounds like shutting down programs is really where we're able to keep staffing where it needs to be. So is there a minimum number where we've shut down all the programs where we really are in 100% crisis mode?
So there are a few more steps we can take right now if we absolutely had to. During the pandemic, there was a period of time where we shut down community corrections because of the pandemic itself, except for house arrest and 24/7, because those were keeping people out. Right. Part of the reason that building stayed closed so long was trying to, at times, try and get a little more staff in place to a point where we felt like we wouldn't adversely, in fact, impact the main correctional facility by putting those staff back at their regular post and work release in the reentry assistance program. So we haven't taken that step yet. Like right now, what we're doing is we're shutting the jail down basically early 4 nights a week, trying to balance between the inmates' needs and their welfare and trying to make things not get too tense, with giving our staff an opportunity who may have been working for, ordered for overtime, being able to get home a couple of hours early to get extra sleep before they come back the next morning. And we do have a few more steps like that we can take, but those steps, each of them come at a cost. And so we want to be very thoughtful when we take those steps. And if we continue to have a trend like this, I mean, everything that we have done during the pandemic and things that we did during the civil unrest, I mean, all that can be on the table for us again to assure safety on a day-to-day basis but but that, like I said, all those things will have an impact on other, nothing's free. Nothing's free.
Got it. And then along those lines, just looking through your notes, this increase in cost is likely due to a combination of leave usage and attrition currently outpacing hiring. So we know that it's hard to get more applicants. So it sounds like it's working smarter and figuring out the leave usage part of it. So just any comments on that?
I can't comment too much on the leave usage because that is something we're in discussions elsewhere about. I can say that we have a training next month for, we've had staff who volunteered and have been interviewed and selected to be peer support specialists. That's an emerging concept for first responders, to have a support system of their own. And I'll spend a lot more time talking about that in either the August or September board report. Once that's trained and it's launched, we'll have close to 30 people across all shifts who can be there as they see their coworkers maybe struggling or having, whether it's work related or not. And it's all managed through an app where referrals can be made anonymously, and somebody from that team will reach out to an officer who may be struggling for any number of reasons and provide them the support, and then referrals to maybe, and we also have built in a list of mental health providers that have a lot of background in working with first responders. And so that's one small piece of a big puzzle that we need to do in order to try and support our staff and help them recuperate and recover mentally from the job that they do every day.
Great, good, thank you.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Mike, getting back to our questions regarding the population racial makeup, on page 41, you give us a good race demographics graph that indicates that 63.71% of the corrections population in the last month were basically minorities, and the balance, 36.14, were, I think it's labeled as white. And that's pretty consistent with what we've seen over time. It's an overwhelming majority in the correction system. We talked about the decrease in the overall average daily population, which is a good thing, but we're not really seeing a decrease in the over-representation of minority population in the overall population. Is that right?
That's correct. We are not.
My final inquiry has to do with COVID, which I'm a little sensitive to, having avoided it for 2.5 years and finally gotten the latest variant last month. But you indicated that you'd had in the last month 5 staff test positive for COVID, right? And considering that you have 418 people on staff, that's not a huge percentage, but it's up, I think, a little bit from the previous month.
It is ticking up.
Okay. And you also mentioned the number in the population, and I didn't get that number. So what is that?
10 confirmed, but I give the caveat that the actual number could be significantly higher than that. Throughout the pandemic, we have consulted with originally Dr. Poore and now Dr. Hughes, and on our own medical director, Dr. Montague, about the value of when you have people all living in a contained space together, the value of testing everyone repeatedly when there's a positive case. When the question that Dr. Poore asked me when we were first had an outbreak, she said, well, what are you going to do with that information? And I'm like, I don't have anything to do with that information. And so it would be just we monitor people for the illness. And then if they need the treatment, then they'll either first stop as the infirmary and hopefully not the hospital after that. But we monitor those areas for people getting sick. We don't necessarily test everybody because that would need to be something that would be done every few days for a few weeks. And we wouldn't be doing anything with that knowledge other than just having it. And our medical resources are already, as everywhere else, stretched a little thin. And so that's since there was no practical benefit to doing those tests, we just test people as they become symptomatic and just assume that everybody's going to be positive in those housing units and treat that housing unit as if people are going to be positive and quarantine them appropriately to try and prevent spread elsewhere in the facility.
Okay, so these 10 in the population are people who you tested and they tested positive?
Correct.
And then those mods that those 10 are in are put in quarantine as a mod, is that right?
That's correct.
And what would be the census population of a mob?
That varies. Our smallest housing units have around 32 beds. Our largest have 64.
And having just come out
1
of
minute.
quarantine myself, how long does the period of quarantine last?
We quarantine a housing unit for at least 14 days, and then because we assume not everybody's going to get infected at the same time, and then everybody on the 15th day is symptom checked before we release that mod.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
No more questions, Director? Anything?
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. With that, is there a motion to adjourn the Board of Corrections meeting? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
We'll now have roll call for the Douglas County Board of Commissioners meeting. Mr. Clerk.
Commissioner Borgeson is absent. Commissioner Boyle? Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh? Here. Commissioner Friend?
Here.
Commissioner Garcia? Here. Commissioner Morgan? Mr. Chair.
Here. Item 1 is minutes and claims. Letter A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting and the Board of Commissioners budget meeting held Tuesday, July 12th, 2022. Item B, approval of claims submitted for payment and processed through Tuesday, July 19th, 2022. What's the will of the board?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item 2 is the consent agenda. There are 5 items on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
We'll go to item 4, which is citizens' comments. Are there any citizens that wish to comment on Board of Commissioners related items that are not listed on the agenda?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska 68132. I want to go back a week to the budget. And I have some questions about the presentation. Well, it wasn't a presentation, it was citizens' comments. But Mr. Doug Kagan presented some information to you that I wonder if you've reviewed and taken any action on. I don't know where he gets his information, but he certainly wasn't questioned on it. But he had lots of recommendations for you that make sense to me. I doubt if he has the time to spend on all that he gathered. I just want to hit a couple items off of that presentation. Again, you could have probably acted on some of them, and you could have asked him some questions about it. And you could have asked him where he got his information. You could have said that he was uninformed. You could have said that his comments were asinine, but you didn't question him. I know according to your rules, you can if you want to, but your attorneys tell you to button it up. But I want to just hit a couple of lies. These are not my words. These are right out of a document that he presented. I guess the biggest one is it true that school resource officers are deputies? Because you could cut that by having OPS hire and various local schools hire their own private security. My questioning on that also is, if they are a school resource officer working on the payroll for that district, although they got funding, are they subservient to the policies of the school district or to the policies of the sheriff or police department? I have a feeling that there's certain things they cannot do because they're on school property. So maybe you should eliminate that and force them to hire their own private security and raise the taxes through their mill levy. Eliminating some agencies such as Eastern Nebraska Office on Aging and Encore, and make them depend on private funding. Would you agree with that, or call that uninformed and asinine? Criminal justice system, I guess I covered that. The main thought is cutting everything that's not necessary under unfunded. Probably every funded program is necessary, but you might lobby the state government for a reduction on some of that, or eliminate all of the unfunded mandates. Working more with the Veterans Affairs at higher rates of reimbursement than in Medicaid than you're getting now. Health centers. Why don't we farm everything out to already established health centers that are probably nonprofits and getting some funding anyway? Why do we need more money for mental health services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And now, last week, I guess, a community restaurant, food preparation service, delivery service that was never really talked about. All that stuff could be eliminated. Excuse me, I guess that was a TIF financing thing, wasn't it? But it serves all the hospitals. Are we putting hospitals out of work in food services? How many employees lose their jobs at the hospitals because we're going to have this thing downtown? Private pharmacies. Make the nonprofit hospitals and their satellite locations levy a portion of their property tax on them, not us. End the dumping from nursing facilities. Contract with another hospital or UNMC for necessary mental health services. Encourage home-based care. Ask the health center staff for budget cut suggestions. I guess that was started in 2013. Haven't heard anything about that. In other words, he's asking you to take action now because you're running for the money at the federal coffers, which probably aren't going to be there next year because they'll stop or they'll be broke, which means our country will be broke. How are you going to provide this money when that's not available? Are you going to have enough people move into Nebraska
It's time, Larry.
and now pay exorbitant prices for houses when they're not buying right now?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other citizens' comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 7, committee discussion and actions. Item A is finance. Item 1 is the budget report, and I'm assuming that is as presented.
Yes.
Item 2 is the monthly fee report. That is as presented. We'll go to item 3, which is ARPA funding, the approval of a resolution authorizing the award of $54,930 in ARPA funds to the Vessel Network LLC. I'll turn that over to Commissioner Friend to explain. Commissioner Friend.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Morgan and I got a chance to meet Well, and I've known a couple of the individuals, Josh Jones and Clay Rowe. I've met Josh, and I know Clay pretty well. And Tanisha Watson is here, I believe, to answer any questions that that the commissioners may have in regard to this ask or the support services that the Vessel Network provides. What I noticed when I did a little bit of research, and I'll be brief, Karen laughs when I say that, there's a void in our community. I've noticed, in my opinion, there's a void in our community when you're talking about adults with developmental disabilities in regard to housing and in regard to employment and in regard to some of the other services that the Vessel Network and other networks and other organizations around Douglas County provide. The Vessel Network is fairly new, but I've watched them. I've watched Clay. I know what these guys are doing, and I think they're filling a void. And from all intents and purposes, they started this right before the pandemic hit. Now, there's an awful lot of stories like that out there, but this one hit close to home. And the reason that it did is because I think I can see the value, and I think the other commissioners will see the value, and I think Douglas County will see the value. So if any commissioners have any questions, I know that there's representatives from the Vessel Network here to give a little more detailed understanding of what these folks are all about. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you move approval?
I do move approval if you allow me to do it.
There's a motion by Commissioner Friend, second by Commissioner Morgan. Anyone want to make comment? Seeing none, please vote.
And while you're voting, if I can just remind the folks on Zoom to mute yourselves. Motion passes 6-0.
Item 4 is ARPA funding for the approval of a resolution authorizing the award of $500,000 to the Canopy South Redevelopment Plaza and La Raza. Also, $50,000 to Lutheran Family Service for expanded mental health services. Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, so I have 3 items today, crossing both items 4 and 5, but beginning with item 4, the Canopy South will be a proposal that really tackles catalyzing and improving tourism in South Omaha, specifically 24th Street, the epicenter of festivals and tourism in South Omaha, redeveloping La Plaza de la Raza, which is kind of the center of all the major festivals in South Omaha. As you probably know, tourism is an automatically qualifying impacted industry under ARPA law. And this project actually has a $500,000 match from the city of Omaha, so there's some collaboration there, which is great to see. For the first item under item 4, the second one, the $50,000, is a mental health services project with Lutheran Family Services that is seeking to expand mental health services in South Omaha specifically. And Mr. Chair, do you want me to speak to number 5 or wait on that? All right, and number 5, the proposal there is specifically to support our small businesses in District 1, many of which have, of course, suffered during the pandemic and now with inflation as well. Many major establishments in South Omaha continue to close down and really struggle, like La Zona La Mayo, Ethnic Sandwich Shop on 13th Street, Flatiron Cafe, and the list just goes on. So this proposal really is going to tackle supporting our small businesses during these times as allowed by ARPA law. So with that being said, I move approval for both items 4 and 5, and I do have reps here if there are any questions.
By Commissioner Garcia, seconded by Commissioner Kavanaugh. Anyone can comment at this time. There's no need to, but you can if you want. Seeing none, please vote.
Give me one moment, please, commissioners. Okay, A4 is going to take up most of the screen, but it is for A4 and A5, so. Thank you. Motion passes 6-0.
We'll do item 6 to continue the trend, do item 6 and 7 together. For ARPA funding, approval of a resolution authorizing the award of $500,000 in ARPA funds to IC Adventures in Ralston. And then item 7 is approval of a resolution authorizing the award of $700,000 in ARPA funds for a Douglas County Restaurant Assistant Program. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
These are ARPA assistance to private small businesses in Douglas County. Number 6, the I See It Ventures development on Main Street in Ralston is a great public-private initiative supported by the city of Ralston, and I note that Mayor Grosser is here with us today. Thank you for stopping by. And it takes a old, underutilized property, the granary, I think it's a 6-acre property, and transforms it into a magnificent multi-use property, including affordable housing. You see in the attached support documents a description of the many activities that will be springing up there in the 14,000-foot granary green outdoor venue, including concerts, and I've been there, and it's really something to see. It will do a lot to revitalize a heavily impacted area right on Main Street, Ralston, and we're very excited about this. The developers, Mr. Witten and Mr. Wellman, are here today if anyone has any questions, but this is a great opportunity for us to jumpstart a development that was heavily impacted by COVID, as a lot of private developments have been, and great for the community of Ralston and great for the taxpayers of Douglas County. So that's $500,000 for that. Number 7 is a $700,000 grant program to Douglas County restaurants. The Douglas County Restaurant Assistance Program is modeled after a program, a very successful program in Lincoln, Lancaster County that was targeted at COVID-impacted small businesses, in this case, basically mom and pop restaurants. And we've all heard the stories over the last 2 years of small, locally owned mom and pop restaurants that have been forced to close because of the impact of COVID. This will allow them to receive grants up to $10,000 to help offset some of the impact that they will have shown to their businesses. These are Main Street businesses. They employ people. They provide important services to our community. We all eat in various restaurants around the community. I note that Commissioner Garcia's proposal also helps restaurants in his community. This is county-wide, and hopefully this would be an incentive for us to look again at this heavily impacted private sector as we proceed further with COVID funding. The Lincoln Lancaster County program, I believe, was $7 million. This is very, very similar in its requirements, but basically smaller businesses, I think, were more heavily impacted. They had less of a cushion, and they're having more difficulty getting back up from supplies and staffing and just rent and cost of doing business. So this will help them stand up and recover. They pay taxes, and they are a vital part of the backbone of our economy. So I would urge support for both of these programs, and I'm very happy to say that they are going to be real additions to our COVID recovery.
That's a motion from you, Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Motion by Commissioner Kavanaugh to approve items 6 and 7, seconded by Commissioner Garcia. Any comment? Seeing none, please vote. Wait a minute, are you commenting on this?
Sir, I couldn't quite hear you. Larry Store, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska, 68132. Here again, I believe we're overstepping the bounds of what our Constitution says or doesn't say, or grants or doesn't grant. They said nothing about this type of thing, which meant that they left that power to state and local governments. However, when we go to the federal government for the money, you are put subservient to the federal government. You will do what they tell you to do, and you will give it up when they ask you to give it up. So this is really unconstitutional action. How many businesses are not getting this money because they maybe didn't hear about it? You know, these things are on the agendas are kind of slam dam. Thank you, ma'am. If you don't read everything on your website, you're probably not aware of it. If you don't happen to get down there this morning, you might miss it altogether because, you have one reading. By the way, first reading, I don't hear you guys read it. I guess that means you read them in your chambers or in your office. Second reading, maybe there's a public hearing. Third reading is no public input, but you come in with the amendments and you change it. So the citizens don't have an input. You need to change it, folks.
Any other comment? Voting is in process. You can finish.
Motion passes 6-0.
Go on to letter G in Human Resources. Item 1 is the personnel report from Civil Service. It is as submitted. Item 2, there is no legislative items, and there is no need for executive session, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Commissioner Boyle. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Garcia. Please vote.
Give me one moment, please. Okay. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
You voting yes, Commissioner Garcia? Thank you. Hey, sorry. Are you voting yes? Yeah. All right. Sorry about that. All right. Motion passes 6-0. Mr. Kavanaugh is voting yes. Motion passes 6-0. We're adjourned at 10:12 a.m.